healthcare meeting in 2 weeks' time. So a number of the people looking around on this call weren't at the meeting 2 weeks ago, but we did send out notes in this meeting, which I would imagine that very few of you have actually read, because I hadn't either. But I was in the meeting. So what, rather than overburden people today with what happened last time, if I could ask you after this meeting to basically just read the notes that were attached to the invite, you'll see where we're coming from and also where we're going to. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to just explain what is what we're trying to do in these working groups. And we've got this one, which is the healthcare one. We've got education, so universities and schools, and residential. Now, the reason we've done that is that a lot of you may be involved in all three of those. So there's going to be common things. And there's other people like Nata who is specializing in the healthcare side of things, who is, I imagine, wanted to be a bit more focused at that. So we're trying to look at this from a cross-disciplinary perspective.
Or something else.
Sorry? Sorry. Yeah, so what I think we want to do. Sorry, could somebody mute?
Jess, can you mute?
Yeah, done that.
Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, so what we want to do is to make sure that we're doing things consistently, so the information that is being captured for healthcare projects is consistent with the information that's being captured for other types of projects, because most of the people that work on these schemes are working across different clients and different parts of the practice. So we're more likely to get it right if we can use more standardization of both processes and data. So that's where we're going with this. The other thing that we've identified through the Golden Thread Task Force is that we've got different people, we've got different levels of engagement from senior management. What we tend to have on these workshops are the people that actually understand the importance of the Golden Thread. Now, we want to help enhance that, but one of our big challenges is getting senior management to understand that they can't simply transfer the risk from on a project down to other people. So we're looking at things in a holistic way that we can work things out to enable to improve planning. So use the Golden Thread to improve the way things are planned, to use it to ensure that when stuff's being created, it's being created using standards and methods that are auditable, and then the information that then goes into Operate can then be properly audited and used going forwards. And the critical thing about this is that it is actually a cycle. So the information from operations then goes back into planning. And this is particularly true in healthcare settings. So we're using the Golden Thread as a means of communicating what that actually means. So we're drilling into a bit more detail to say, what is the Golden Thread? Well, for a start, it's electronic. So, you know, people saying that that O&M manuals are part of the Golden Thread, they are a small part of it, but you can't really use them as being it's not machine readable data. And importantly, it needs to be going through the whole process. And this is really important, that when an asset is moved from one organization's management to another, the data needs to be easily transferred. So what we've done, we've done quite a lot of work to break down the activities that people are carrying out to provide the information that's needed for the golden thread. So we're then looking at that from a design and construction perspective. And one of the obvious ones here is make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of what information or what they actually want to do. So get all the different stakeholders to agree. And then being able then from an operations point of view, after the project has delivered a facility or delivered a refurbishment of a facility, then being able to keep it up to date. So those are the principal activities that we're trying to support. But from an organizational perspective, we want to try and put some tangible value against those things, because, just capturing information and classifying it in itself, that doesn't deliver anything. But what does deliver something is where you've got better quality information that is auditable. So that's a benefit that goes through all of those different stages. Also being able to apply the golden thread to actually say there's cost reductions across the life cycle. And then to be able to look at things from a point of view of enabling supply chains to work in a far more joined up way so that they become responsible for the information that they're providing. Now, all too often on projects, we're finding that information that is being handed over to the construction, to the asset management team, is actually just tender information. It wasn't what actually was installed. And the supply chains can help with that, but they need to be engaged in the process and be responsible for it. My colleague Tim here has been doing a lot of work on door schedules and making sure that the information about doors and ironmongery, for example, are being properly recorded. And that may seem trivial, but it really isn't from a point of view of fire safety. So we then come to digital records and making sure that we've got asset information models and a proper golden thread, and providing the means for doing operations and have you got the right people doing the work? So there's a whole range of different things there that could then be automated. So our workshop tomorrow on AI and data engineering is going to be diving into that in a bit more detail. So if you're interested in the AI part of what we're doing together, then just put AI in the chat. If you're not already coming tomorrow, we'll send you an invite. The principle that we're working on here is that the golden thread should not be an additional cost. We've seen it quite regularly. It used to be the case that people would say, if you want BIM, then it's going to be another 20% or something like that. The point is, all of this information is already a legal requirement in most cases. So therefore, you should already be collecting it, paying for it to be collected. So let's not waste it. And what we've then done is looked at this from a board perspective. So those various different steps that I was showing you earlier, we've actually translated those into financial savings. And we've got a report which we're asking people to review. It's a white paper that actually goes through that. So I'll touch on that a little bit later. So if you're interested in seeing the white paper that supports this particular series of analysis, then if you put white paper in the chat, we'll let you have that. I appreciate that some of you were with us yesterday and on Monday, and therefore you've already probably asked for it. But if you haven't asked for it, you want to see the white paper, and you're willing to read through it and give us some comments back, then it's freely available to you. So I'm just going to touch now on where we are at the moment, and that is that a lot of the information that is being captured really to minimize risk. And where we are at the process that we've got at the moment is looking at risk in many cases as it was 3 or 4 years ago. The risk now, because of the new legislation, has increased substantially. So therefore, there's a much greater need for information. And if we're going to make sense of any of that, we really need to have good classification and taxonomy to be able to ingest it. So the information needs to be machine readable. We need to be able to collaborate around it as well, because no one party can actually provide all of the information. And we need to also record the context of that information. And the thing that's common to all of those, I would say, are spaces and assets, irrespective of what systems you're using, what processes you're using. We really need to make sure that everybody's talking about the same space. And if there's assets in that space, that everybody's referring to the same asset. We also need to overlay the different purposes as to why people want that information. In many cases, the immediate thing is to say, make sure we've got the statutory work. But as Mick Harrison, that's on this call at the moment, he gave me an example the other day where in a university there was a burst pipe, and it was noticed by the security people at 8 o'clock in the evening, and it took 8 hours for the contractors that were called in to be able to resolve it. And one of the things was they didn't know where to switch the valves off, the stop valve off. So I can imagine the impact of that was substantial. So that is a good example. It's not a statutory thing, but it's an operational thing. And also we need to look at things from an organizational perspective. But again, space assets in spaces is key to that. It may be that we've got fire safety, we've got energy management, we've got things like IT infrastructure and things like that. Again, we need to be recording against the same spaces and assets. Sorry if this is getting a bit tedious, but if we then look at that, apply that to the way healthcare facilities work, you've got service lines, you've got care settings, and you need to be able to match those two things together to make sure that the care setting, which is a space in which you can deliver the care that's part of that service line, is aligned. And obviously it's got to be available. What have you got then? Spaces and assets. Healthcare is complicated. Right? It's probably one of the most complicated ecosystems, I would say, because we've got primary care, we've got secondary care, and we've got tertiary care. And again, available spaces. We've then got step up care, step down care, and community services. So these are all the sort of nuances that we need to be aware of. Not on every project, but we need to make sure that we've got the right sort of classification that's able to deal with all these things. So what we're trying to do is bring together people that are in this room who have expertise, and then bring them together in a way that we can then provide client organizations with tested solutions, that it means they're not experimenting each stage. And to do that, we need classification, so that we can bring together the various different software applications and then deliver those. I'm going to stop there for any questions. Has anybody got any observations, any questions on what I've been through there? Anybody disagree with me? Okay. Let me, Kevin, are you on board with what I'm saying there?
Very much so, George. Yeah, I think perhaps some of my comments would go back to the kind of root causes of why there are so many issues. And we can talk about those in terms of the way that BIM was envisioned originally, and how it's now applied, and especially when it comes to design and build of major buildings. That's the bit that seems to create most of the errors, where all of the MEP, the mechanical, electrical and plumbing systems, you'd expect to be in the design from REBA stage 1 and 2, whereas in reality it's still being contracted out to subcontractors on a performance basis in REBA 5, which means that it very often doesn't exist in the model. So you've got this disconnection between data in the model and data that's coming back from contractors that's probably not digital, and then you're having to write systems and processes around those errors rather than correcting the errors. And I think it's important, whilst there's an interim or transitional need to think about how that federated model works, with historic things in PDF files and on paper, and the goal of having everything digital back from the model. What we don't want to do is write process around errors that have come from the beginning of the construction program. We should be looking to correct that rather than write a process around it. Otherwise you end up with an unworkable series of kind of workaround systems that cause an awful lot of OPEX cost.
Thank you. Pierre.
George, very quickly, we've spoken about this before. To me, there's two streams. The first stream is the one that takes place in the design and engineering phases, the work stages. And that's where the procurement, the classifications, etc., are all being set up. And that tells everybody as you go down the line what that particular object is clearly and accurately. As we go through various different handovers, milestones, gateways, etc., the ownership of that data changes in the same way that it changes necessarily from a system or entities and moves into a product. And we need to manage that part. The second stream was the one that you've regularly picked up about the assets actually being scanned at the time of handover by the contractor. And to me, there's no problem. It's a stream. It will have these handovers. The handovers are the really important ones, to get those as automated as possible. So it's very, very simple for me. There's two streams. There's a hybrid of both of them. You can share the data backwards and forwards, but it does mean that at the end of the day, we get something that reflects what was as constructed. Thank you.
Yes, I think on that, I absolutely agree that what we've got is a unique ID at the beginning, which is possibly a placeholder for a particular product that's going to be installed. And that product is probably in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, is going to be replaced with another product. The asset itself, the asset ID itself, needs to be retained, because that's always going to be a fan call unit. That's always going to be a fire door, right? Unless something changes. The fact that the product itself changes is something that we need to recognize. That is something that's an incremental thing that works through. Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to make the comment because it's absolutely critical that about this data coming through is that at the moment it's baked into O&Ms, but really, really badly and not consistently. And O&Ms have really got to change to become packages of information and data. And in order to do that, you've also got to specify what that actually is. Otherwise, it's never going to change. But if you look at where O&Ms have come from the big volumes of printed material that was handed over in volumes of, that filled a room, to then being scanned documents in the noughties, they just scanned everything and shoved it into a massive PDF. And then they started to then have companies build up programs that people could then construct their own M's, but it would still produce another document. And as we've seen with our checking, they're very inadequate, or because they're never checked. But if we change the requirement and said, you're producing a package of information and this is what it'll look like, and it contains data and it contains information, then I think you stand a chance, because I don't think that you're going to get subcontractors putting information back into a model. I just don't see it happening.
But isn't that the problem though, Tim? Isn't that the
Mhm.
problem, that the design or the Revit model, the 3D model, the model which the golden thread envisages, should be a complete model of the building with all of its infrastructure included? In actual fact, it's often just the envelope of the building, the structural envelope of the building, and all of the MEP, because it's gone out to tender under design and build with an output spec, is never included in the digital model. It's coming back in a kind of analog way, i.e. a series of manuals, PDFs, other data. And then what that creates is obviously a problem with the golden thread, but it also creates a massive OPEX cost in order for someone to keep administering all that data throughout the life of the building. And that's an area where, George made the point earlier in his presentation that if you're paying for BIM, you're paying to have a model which covers all of the building, including all of its infrastructure. And if you're not getting that, then that's a problem that has to be addressed back at the start.
Well, I think the thing is, Kevin, I'm because, as you know, I've been involved in the BIM world for many, many years, probably. I've been partially responsible for promoting this idea of having the geometric model as being a tool that's used in asset management, and I was wrong. Yeah, I was wrong. The workflows that are established, and we keep trying to make that work, and I've not come across anywhere where it practically works, and there's very good reasons for that. The reason is, if you look at things from maybe something like aerospace, they do produce models, and they produce them in a way that can be used going forward. But in design and construction, we're largely using the model to produce drawings and schedules, right? And therefore we cut corners in the way of doing that, because there's so many people working on a model. Therefore, that's the reality. I mean, Pierre, you're shaking your head, but
George, can I just add my penny's worth in just there, because obviously I started in the 80s with building modelling, and we rapidly saw that first of all they were using it for design and presentation, and that was great, and you could see the opportunities. And then when the building services people started to use it in anger, they said the greatest benefit they were getting out of it was coordination, clashes. And I think that's still true today. and I think it's because they have these, where you have with inside some of the applications, you can have these sort of BIM collaboration where you can all view the same model and pull your bits in and make comments to avoid those sort of clashes. The question is when it comes to actually installed, and the sort of clashes that they were more interested in was pipes and ducts rather than wiring and fittings, and that's where so and they would only focus on those problem areas, so they would never do a complete building model of their system.
Exactly.
And I think
it's the point, Tim, that so if you go back to pre-80s when people were designing buildings primarily, they would design the whole building, including all of the systems. They would specify all the systems, all the pipe work, all the installation, all the electrical systems. They would put it together as a series of packages and go out to contractors and cost that spec.
Yep.
Then what happened is, in terms of economy, it was decided to go design and build. So what tends to happen now is the architect designs the envelope of the building and the structural elements, and then puts together, or an MEP specialist will put together a performance spec saying, we want you to keep this building at 20 degrees, we want it to be BREEAM category, whatever. And it's up to the contractors to how they do that. So it'll go out to 3 or 4 contractors. They'll all come back with different ideas, different equipments, different ways of doing it. And then there's a whole lot of value engineering all the way through, stage 5, as the building's being built very often, when there's negotiation with contractors and blah, blah, blah. So by the time it's all finalized, it's very much last minute. It never gets put back in the model.
Exactly.
So that's what happens in reality. Then you get all of this miscellaneous data that you have to manage, which is coming as a fault of not putting the golden thread in place right from the start. And so then it's left to the operator to actually manage all that data and the O&M team to manage it all.
So I don't want this to become a discussion around whether you should or shouldn't update BIM models. I'm absolutely convinced that if we can update the BIM models, we should, right? What I'm saying is we can't rely on it, because both commercially and also technically, there are big challenges with doing that.
And I suppose I'm saying, George, just on that point, sorry to interrupt you, that we're in a kind of transitional stage, aren't we? If you go back to pre-BIM, everything was hard copy, files, libraries of data. Yeah. And now we've gone to BIM, which is very much the ultimate 3D solution. You can print out a building. But we're still in that transitional phase where we're trying to go from one to the other, which means we have to deal with a federated model, and we're going to have to deal with it for quite a while. But we shouldn't lose sight of what the ultimate position is, where it's all digital without any of the kind of PDFs to manage and the electronic data management to deal with.
Just so we clarify, I'm absolutely convinced that we need a BIM model to do asset management. What I'm saying is it doesn't need to be a geometric BIM model. Yeah, because actually one of the most, if you talk to people that are involved with smart buildings, they're not interested in the geometry. They're looking at what's connected and what's it doing.
No, but it's more it's a bit like if you go back to the early days of ISO 9000, the principle was that you have a method to operate your business, and it's all written down, and you write it down, then you do what you've written down. What's happening with BIM at the moment is that you write it all down as the BIM model, but then there are local operating procedures that are created in order to manage miscellaneous data that comes in from the side, and then you're creating something which is a bit of a mess, really, and it's not a very efficient process. And it's also the reason why the golden thread gets broken, because you've got all these people creating their own workarounds rather than going back to the BIM model and making sure it all originates from the model.
But in practice, how can it all originate from the model if some of the things like electrical cabling and things like that, and electrical components and things, if there's no commercial, if there's no value placed on that work just doesn't get done.
Yeah, perhaps I'm not perhaps describing it in the way I'd hope. That if you take an electrical system, as it's installed.
I'm sorry, but Pierre's had his hand up, and so has Matt. Do you mind if I just
sure.
close that down for just a minute.
Thanks, Kevin. George, very quickly, the first thing when you start your project and the first time you put your first room in, you need a performance spec. And Kevin raised that story about the MEP and a performance spec. So from the golden thread, that's the first thing that says this product has to deliver a certain performance.
Absolutely
and
agree.
that gives you everything. However, the one part I want to come back to, and it's something that was mooted a while back, was that you don't have O&M manuals anymore. The O&M manuals are owned by the manufacturer. Every single model type is in one single place for the entire industry. And the moment that you come along, there's simply a URL that connects to that source. Easy.
Absolutely,
one place,
fully agree.
efficient.
That's the method. I mean, this isn't about any particular product, but that's exactly what we do in ActivePlan. So we've got a product library, and the information goes into the product library, and that's an industry product library, and it's free for the manufacturers to hold their information in there. So I'm absolutely in agreement with you. This nonsense of the O&Ms being created uniquely with product information on every single project is crazy. Matt?
Yeah, so I think where this all kind of hangs up really is, I mean, we've got really good now at PIMS on the PIM side of things. We can create beautiful 3D models, clash-free, loads of asset information data to them, and then hand them over to the FM that are maintaining the estates. But they have no resource or capacity to carry on updating that data-rich model side. I mean, it doesn't make sense for them either to be able to employ a Revit technician, BIM information manager, whatever, to carry on updating that model side. And then when you start getting remediation works or minor works that are constantly changing the building over that life, then obviously that original handover is now totally out of date. As far as I'm concerned, the data-rich model on the BIM side handover is out of date as soon as they get it, because they don't know how to sort of utilize it. Now, in an ideal world, yes, being able to update that constantly, but end of the day, it is about that information and what that information relates to. And obviously, this is where I think reality capture has got this brilliant aspect of whether it's a 360 image, obviously in the AP side, or LiDAR kind of elements and updating that scan throughout. If you've got what actually is there that you can update throughout with just a picture and have that pinned to that asset and then all the information that relates to it, that's far more probably powerful than a beautiful, sexy 3D data rich model that can't be updated because they haven't got the resource, etc. And I think that's where everything sort of hangs up. And FM then just go back to how they used to do things, and they drop all the Kobe and all the beautiful BIM stuff they've had on the new build and go back to what they think they know previously. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Matt. I think it's probably just worth pointing out that Matt's business is about producing, or has been for many years, about producing coordinated BIM models.
Yeah, so your CAD side with sort of MEP coordination sort of handover, and it took a while to get contractors on board, subcontractors, because why are we paying for this? We'll just install it and sort it on site. But now they're seeing the benefits with install. But again, one of the beautiful things I loved doing a few years back in an engagement with FM is it's the only time I've used virtual reality in a good way, just literally getting your head in the ceiling void in the model and saying this is how you get to the valve, just that kind of side. And they love that because then you can get a building better. But yeah, this frustrates me now of handing over that beautiful model with all your system information and data, but obviously you've compiled it to your CAF FM and linking it through, but it never gets used. Work with York Trust, and they've just had a new build, and then they're not actually getting any model data or anything like that. They're not even getting an asset register. They just use BIM to build it, and then they're just going to go around and do an asset registry after, which is fairly shocking. But they haven't got the resource, the management, the system in place to deploy a decent BIM in life cycle environment, really. So,
but surely that Matthew is the point I was making earlier, that it's important to, over the 30-year life of a building, an electrical system will change considerably in terms of things that are changes that are made to it, adjustments that are made to it, and that should be part of the golden thread, because it's vital to know exactly what's connected to what. Now, for me, the bit that's missing is the link between the CAFM system and the BIM model.
Yes, definitely.
It's all very much sort of handballing from one to the other rather than being linked together. And I think it'll change. A lot of the problems come from the older relational database models like Maximo and SAP that don't really plug into 3D. They're much more 2D models that were written in the 80s. Whereas the later microservice systems are much more able to plug in and operate, with real-time exchange between the two. And I think that's the point I was trying to make. We should be aiming, surely, as an advisory group, to look at what's possible and what best practice looks like, rather than just coming up with workarounds, as it were.
Yeah. I agree, and I don't think we're looking at workarounds. What we're actually looking at is concentrating on the things that, as I put in my earlier presentation, I think a lot of the things, if we've got space and asset being identified in a common way, then that answers the question that you've raised, Kevin, because you've got the asset ID, you've got the location of where it is, right, and the context of what's around it. Franco.
I just wanted to add something to what Pierre said, just to avoid any possible misunderstandings. Whereas I agree fully with the statement that manufacturers hold the most comprehensive and most reliable information about their products. It is also true that products become components of a system that is delivered by different entities, different subcontractors. For example, I don't know, a heating system is made of piping, boilers, heat exchangers, sensors, panels, and so on, that are manufactured by different manufacturers. So at the end of the day, somebody must collect all this information and turn it into a system-related information, right? And all of the system sooner must be defined for two main reasons. One is because when you are at the end of the delivery stage, you must test a system. You don't test a pipe. You don't test a single pump. A pump is part of the system. Secondly, because during the maintenance and operation of an asset, you must look at the asset also from the system viewpoint. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, definitely.
Is anybody in disagreement with what I said? By the way, I'm a mechanical engineer with a certain experience on the pains deriving from breaking the responsibility and breaking the system also contractually into bits and pieces, whereas they should always be held together as an entity which has a fundamental role in the built environment.
Kevin, thank you.
Yeah,
Franco.
I was going to say, I totally agree with what Franco said. I mean, that's been my experience within healthcare, especially, that whilst there, are individual manuals provided for individual, manufactured parts of a system, there's very seldom a manual that covers the operating of the actual system itself. So, with a big ventilation system, you've got manuals for the fire dampers, you've got manuals for the control valves, you've got manuals for the, the main air handling unit, manuals for the vents, but there's nothing written for how you operate the whole thing. And that's the problem.
Exactly.
If you're operating a building, you want to know which switch you turn and what it does, and then how you maintain the functionality of that complete system. There's no point in just having a manual for a pump or a manual for a motor. You want a manual that covers the whole thing. And because they're often, provided and installed by separate MEP contractors, nobody actually has the overarching responsibility for writing those manuals.
Exactly. Probably the only type of manufacturer that is getting close to this role that I was trying to describe are the controls. The people that provide the building automation system. They are the ones that are supposed to have the most comprehensive and the smartest knowledge of what the system should do, because through their control panels and control system, they must have a view. The people that put the instruments in the P&ID diagrams are those that must understand how the system works. So probably they are technically the most qualified people for writing a system operating manual.
I totally agree. I've written lots of O&M manuals for hospitals, and I've used often the EMS suppliers' general overview as my starting point, because they have a better understanding, as you say, of the whole system.
Yeah. You know, you try to convince a pipe supplier or a valve supplier or a pump supplier to provide the O&M manual of the system where the pipe and pump are, you know, to which they belong. You will never get it, because they will say, I'm giving you a pump. I tell you how the pump works in any condition. You know, they provide you with a curve, whatever. But you know, somebody understand how the system works. You know, what kind of flow is required in that situation or in that range of situations.
And
So
that goes back
on that a bit. Sorry, Kevin, go.
That goes back to the point about putting it all into the model. You know, not necessarily the original, you know, design model, but a digital model of the building, because then you can see the system, you can see all the elements of the system, and you can understand, you know, what that manual should look like, or what the data should look like in order to manage it and maintain it properly.
And you may need to flip between a schematic and the 3D model, or a 360 photo.
So it should all reference back to that original model, George, shouldn't it? Because then if you change it, you can see what those changes are. Otherwise, what happens is people are changing it outside of the model. So after 30 years, it often bears no resemblance to what you started out with, and you're handing over data that's out of date, as it were.
So kind of reversing that slightly from a engineer's sort of point. We had a great conversation yesterday with a council, and they're really concerned because they're losing one of their key estates managers who's 65 years old and about to retire, and everything's in his head. They are so worried about everything they're going to lose in his head, and they need to extract that as much as they can. But then obviously it brings into that element of, if they gain that, they understand in a golden thread sort of route, they're able to understand their building better, that they can feed back. But I mean, obviously the two sides to it, to be able to learn from and gain the information and extraction. So yeah.
Okay. So part of the reason for this meeting is to talk about what we're doing in terms of the golden thread activities and tasks. So some of you that have been on the meetings earlier this week will already know this, but Franco is leading that for me to be able to identify what tasks are needed to support the different activities. So what I'd like to do is just spend 10 minutes or so explaining to you what we're trying to do in that regard. And then, you know, you can then decide if you're willing to invest a bit of time helping us with that. This started as a piece of work using Excel back in basically in early January. And what we were trying to do was to look at the various different activities and why you're doing that work, and then looking at what the operational benefits are. Now, the next step with this, and we've actually turned this into a report, which I mentioned earlier, the white paper. But these activities are quite detailed. The benefits are quite detailed, but we need to translate the activities into tasks. So, for example, we've got a range of different activities that we've identified, and we can then say who's responsible, who's accountable. So this is something that Franco is leading on. And the purpose of this is that if we can then identify, there are some tasks which actually represent a number of these different activities. So one task may apply to many activities. And we decided that Excel is not the best tool for doing that. So Mo from Mortar has kindly offered to set up a Mortar site, which is it's a combination of a database and something that looks like Excel. for us to work on. Franco, could you explain a little bit about what we're trying to do in that area and what you would like people to offer?
Well, we would like to capture, with the contribution of as many people as possible, these tasks, as George called them, which are much smaller things to do than an activity. An activity can be too high level. And the idea is to, once we have collected as many tasks as we can, we want to analyze with the contribution of anybody in order to identify any tasks that many people have mentioned. For example, identify duplications. If many people provide the same description of a task, it means that that task is recurring in many different situations. We want to make sure that the meaning of the whatever task is provided is clear. We are going to test it in some way or form. We want to classify them as much as possible into some groups that we will suggest. And then we want to share the result of this analysis with all the contributors to this exercise. This is at a high level what the plan is about. Okay.
So the model that Mo showed yesterday, which goes through that, have you got that easily available? I'm just trying to find it at the moment. I know that Mo set that up for us, but I can't find it at the moment.
You mean the actual application, the window that shows the. Well, I think it may generate confusion if we open it now. I think
Okay.
It's important to make sure that everybody understands what the intended methodology is, and if anybody has some suggestions. But it's basically an exercise of collecting suggestions, experiences, right, and analyze them, and then return to the people that have provided this contribution the benefit of this analysis. So this environment, which is, if you want, a database, will be shared with those that contribute to the production of these, to the definition of these tasks. One thing I wanted to add: there are some tasks that form part of ISO 19650, of the standard that, as you all know, governs BIM, right? And also, this type of mandatory tasks will be transferred into Morta. Okay. This is a very preliminary stage, George. I'm working on it because I think it needs to be made a little bit clearer. But maybe at a high level it could be. But I can anticipate to you that it will look slightly different.
Sure.
I would really be interested in knowing if anybody has any comments on this exercise that we are embarking upon. Has anybody?
Our goal with it, everybody, is to have a series of tasks that everybody agrees with that are needed to be done by somebody, and who should do those, and then we can put a framework around them as to what that task should be. What information does that task need to be carried out, and what information does that task generate that then feeds into somebody else? So it's some of the fundamental things with the golden thread. So as these are the slides that Mo showed yesterday. So basically looking at things from a point of view of the work, the job to be done, as Franco calls it, who's responsible for it, and then any things that we can put to enable that. So that's really where we're coming from. So is anybody interested in working through that that exercise. If you're interested in getting involved in that, then yes, Chris, you've got your hand up.
Hi, George. Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. Apologies if I suddenly sort of just phased out for a second there, but you were talking a lot about the work to be done in terms of the context of the golden thread there. Could you just give an example of that? And the reason I ask is because I'm not 100% sure whether that is the work that is included in defining the processes in terms of what those three sort of segments that were on that slide. And I take what you're saying, Franco, in terms of the fact this is preliminary and we're starting somewhere, absolutely. Or is it to do with the actual activities that would then be in play once the information is brought into Mortar? I wasn't too sure, sorry.
Yeah,
I just wondered what the work was. Sorry.
Yeah, forget Mortar for the minute. Mortar is just being used as a mechanism to capture the information, and we don't need to use Mortar. Mo's quite happy for us to provide to do it with spreadsheets, and that might be the simplest way of doing it. And I've just put down here some tasks that we've discussed. Yeah. So somebody has got to produce a task information delivery plan. Who should be responsible for that? And who should be responsible for, keeping it up to date? These are some basic tasks. Now, Franco has been talking with Paul Oakley about tying them back to the ISO 19650 tasks. So do you want to say something about that, Franco?
Well, no, those are I'm going to use a strange term here. Those are the holy tasks in the sense that they are mandated, they have to be executed by somebody, right? So if we start challenging, those tasks, it becomes a bit of a problem. The only thing we can do is make sure that those tasks are clear. If you want my honest, personal, professional opinion, I believe that some of those tasks are not clear. I take full responsibility of what I'm saying, but I have started to dive into those 96 tasks, and I have a problem in understanding them.
Could we share what those tasks are? Those is Mo going to put those into the platform?
Hold on a second. If I may share my screen,
please, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, share my screen. Window. Can you see my screen?
Not quite yet. Yes, can now.
Okay. Okay. I repeat, I take full responsibility of what I'm saying, right? I think that task 5.2, as an example, right? 5.2.1a, consider the asset information requirements. What does it mean?
Yeah.
Can anybody explain to a poor Italian mechanical engineer what consider the asset information requirements mean?
I'm just going to put a layman's view on that, and that is to ensure that the relevant data sheets are available for that product or that asset prior to its installation, and it's stored and logged securely and
I don't want to be fussy, but consider. I wouldn't use a verb consider for a standard. Do you mean it means something else? It means I don't know, take into account to create the asset information requirements.
It needs something a lot more defined. I've had this elsewhere in other standards quite recently. Consider means I've considered it and I haven't done it. That's the risk. Sorry.
Anyway, it's just an example. Of what I classified as holy, task in the sense that somebody has written them, and it's a matter of making sure that we all understand what the task is about. And most important, this is something new also to you, George. I've never mentioned it, but it has just come to my mind. My plan, and I hope that what you will hear makes sense, is to assign to every task an agreed role, with a name
Definitely.
that everybody understands what it is. For example, if you are a BIM manager, you should do certain things. If you are a plumber, you should do other things, right? So we are talking about, in my opinion, a very interesting exercise, and I would really like to, as I said more than once, to hear if anybody has any opinion about this important task, because I think that the value of this exercise is great, not because I've been appointed to do it, but it is objectively great.
Okay, so we're up to the wire now. Is there anybody that would like to join with Franco in this? What should we call it? Should we call it tasks?
Tasks, please.
Yeah.
Tasks.
Can you just put tasks in the chat, and we'll invite you to the workshop on that. If you put tasks in the chat, what we'll probably do initially is what we might do. I think Mo suggested, because we Sundip was concerned about things going into Mortar yesterday. Maybe we share the spreadsheet initially, so that people can just have something that we can then capture quickly, and then maybe we use Mortar as well as part of that process. What do you think, Franco?
Well, whatever any contributors finds simplest.
Exactly.
It needs to
be. It needs to be
so
simple, doesn't it?
If you receive the spreadsheet, maybe you can return it. We have to decide to whom, and maybe you append your name to the spreadsheet, to the file name, because I have to know if
where
if the spreadsheet is coming from Mary Poppins or from George Stevenson, right?
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I hope I can do better than Mary Poppins, but not much.
Well, I'm sure, probably.
Good. Okay. I think this has been helpful. Has anybody else got any comments to make before we close?
Well, if I may add another comment, I would like to call this exercise as an honest form of collaboration.
Yeah.
I can assure you that I will guarantee full transparency to what I'm doing. I'm open to criticism. I don't need any.
I've just remembered something. I did ask Tim to show some work that we've been doing, which I think is going to be relevant to this. So anybody that wants to hold on for 5 minutes or so, we can just talk through that. What we've been doing, I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier. What we've been doing, one of the big challenges is knowing what information is needed for what purpose. Okay, that's part of this issue. Now, what we've got is a data set that we've captured over many years, looking after healthcare centres. So we've got 11 years of help desk information, of what information was what the problems were that were reported to the help desk, and how they were resolved. Right? Now that's really rich information. So what Tim's done is been putting that into an LLM to actually identify what are the common problems that we've got, and therefore we can then use that. So Tim, could you just show that briefly?
Yep. So first of all, I'll show the data set. So this was the data set. It's about just under 13,000 records, covering a period of about 10 years. And it is covering, at its peak, was about 40 different buildings. And these buildings were all healthcare centres. So that's the first thing. So we just need to get, so obviously this is using different windows. Right, okay, so. Right, so the first thing I did was upload it and then just ask a simple question. And I didn't tell it initially that it was healthcare centres, and anybody can do this. And it occurs to me that, why would you want to do this? Well, first of all, just to ask questions of what are the top rating ones, which buildings give you the most problems, how do you rate these? Was the severity that the users gave to the problem, was it as severe as it should have been? And when it first looked at it, it didn't know that it were healthcare buildings, and it completely changed the analysis once I said, which is a little bit further down here, because it can talk for Britain sometimes. There were some problems with the data. I'll go through those sort of things. So let's just see where we are here. Right, this is when I said these relate to healthcare centres. Does that influence the analysis? So, you know, obviously when you start with the data set, give it as much information about what you're giving it that's not actually in the data set. The other thing I did was get it to analyze the data set and then come up with that's the original. And what I asked it to do was then assess it against statutory requirements. So it chose to do this against the statutory requirements that are legally enforced, and then the healthcare technical memorandums, which are normally called HTMs. So I thought, well, that's quite good that it's actually now referencing actual documents that you can refer to. So apart from all the analysis, and what I also did was ask it to give me some insights and produce me a spreadsheet output. Now, normally you'd say, oh, well, can't you do all this in Power BI? Well, yeah, you could configure it if you knew all, how to do all this. But if you just, are a non-programmer and you don't know how to use Power BI, this is a sort of environment that you would want to actually do and ask the data set questions. Now, one of the things that's occurred to me is that once you have a data set that spans about 10 years, you can start to ask questions about what's the likely maintenance requirements going to be going forward on ad hoc, unplanned maintenance. So you start to get insights, and you start to also then, if you started to add against those 40 buildings to give age, size of property, and construction types and heating systems, etc., then you start to get more insights as to what sort of buildings give you more problems than other types. So does one with say a mechanical heat recovery system in it with localized heaters have more problems with it than one that's got a traditional boiler and radiators? Do the doors that were manufactured provided by that have got this sort of specification have more problems than the ones that were provided by others? So obviously there's more information that you start to gather. So that's in essence really the sort of stuff that we've been doing. But it's as I say, it's just over 10 years. I don't know whether the data set is large enough, but what I have done is just identify the minimum, what I think is the minimum number of fields that you need to do it. Because if you're going to do this on any data set and you're going to share it with people, you're going to need a few sanity checks over it. So there's 10 fields there. And what you then need to do before you share it is make sure that you are not contravening any GPDR. So that the
GDPR.
Thank you, and that one, so that you understand what's going on. That's about it,
Chris,
George. Really,
thank you.
In a nutshell.
Yeah, we'll probably touch on this in a bit more detail tomorrow in the meeting tomorrow in the afternoon. But if you want to talk to us specifically about what Tim's just talked about there, if you just put I don't know, help desk, if you just type help desk in the chat, then, because I think this is a really exciting piece of work that I think if we can gain access to other help desk information that we can anonymize, I think that will be extremely helpful in informing what information on a practical level is needed. Because most people think of FM as being about planned and preventative maintenance. Whereas actually,
yeah, can I just make one more point, George? Is that in terms of what I might look at doing is seeing whether we can get this data into Mortar. So it's under a specific section of healthcare centres, so that because what Mortar has is what's called it has a tools section where you can actually have an AI then use a tool, so you can link up a Gemini or an open AI, which is ChatGTP, or a Copilot or whatever, to then use that to analyse the data set, so that you don't have to go through that. So we can probably create some custom GPTs that actually then do this, so that anybody could then who's got access to this would be able to do their own analysis and ask their own questions of what is effectively BIM for asset management, stroke housing, sample data sets to get insights. And also, what other things can be added to it? I mean, one of the things that we're doing, say with Help Desk here, is whereabouts in the buildings were those problems. So there is information enough to actually locate where most of those problems actually occurred. And then when you start to see patterns in a building, you can start to say, hang on a sec, you know, if this is happening in rooms that are over in this zone, or they're connected to this building, or something else is happening. Anyway,
Tim, can I ask one question? Are these unique instances, or do they include people who've complained about something, not had any response, complained again, not had any response, and complained again? Because so that changes the value of the data, or the perspective.
Yeah, sure. The help desk records were all inputted by the building managers on these buildings. So it wasn't open to anybody. So if somebody had a problem, they would ring up the building manager, and then they would type it into the system.
Well, because when they
create a record, Richard, they type it in, and then they get a list of suppliers, and they say it's their responsibility. That would then create an SLA, tell them what the SLA was, how long they got to respond to it, and the system would then send an email to them identifying where it was, etc. And then so they'd get an email with an attachment that said, can you go and fix this leaking toilet?
So and here's a plan of where it is. They should be unique then.
These are all unique. Yeah. Right. So I noticed there was a radiator, and it was the same one. There are two things next to each other. Radiator not working in the same room, but they were on different days. And you go, well, somebody didn't fix it properly, you know. And it's those sort of things, you know.
Right. So wait. So it was the same radiator.
Yeah, it was the same radiator. Well, it was the same room.
So it was one instant. So it was actually.
Yeah, I think it's here actually. Let's see if I can just see it. Radiator not working. So you see there, it was recorded on the 8th and on the 11th, and you can see it's in January. When you need your radiators.
That's counting as two things, but it's actually one.
No, it's not one thing, Richard. It didn't get fixed.
Yeah, can I just explain, Richard? Can I just explain?
Yeah.
Right? Our customer on this were the healthcare, were the building managers, right? All of the maintenance activity was actually being carried out by a third-party company called Integral.
Yeah.
Right? They use their own reactive maintenance help desk management system. But the reason the building managers wanted this, and they used it for 10 years, was because they were regularly reporting things to Integral that weren't getting solved. Right?
Yeah.
So therefore they needed something to manage their relationship with the end user to do that.
Sure. But my point is, if you're saying a statistic that 5% of calls to a help desk were because of issues with radiators, that radiator was mentioned twice, but it was the same fault. That's the point I'm making.
No, I agree. But if you've got 13
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so the point is, because we've got the data, it's a really good point. Because we've got the data, we can identify where those patterns are.
Fine, but I'm just saying we need to do that, don't we?
Yeah,
it's
sure.
not, yeah.
Yeah, and the highest ranking errors were actually in were doors. So doors were the most complained about, or the ones that had most faults.
Franco.
Can I suggest, this is such an important topic. I don't think we should discuss it 15 minutes after, the allocated. I think we should dedicate a proper, maybe even more than one workshop to this. This is such an important, we have such a large number of data, well, a substantial amount of data, and it's such an important topic that I suggest to deal with it, in a dedicated session.
Absolutely, and we're very much looking for other people that have got such data sets
exactly
that we could then mine. So good. Okay, so another good meeting. I hope you found it useful. Let's. I think next steps, we've got Franco's tasks. We've got a meeting tomorrow, and we've got the white paper, which I'll share with you. I can't think what else we're supposed to be doing, Richard. I've probably confused everybody.
No, I
Chris,
think I think that you've covered that, haven't you?
Yeah, I think so. Good. Okay, we'll go.
And there's another meeting in 2 weeks. Have you said that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Another healthcare meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We've also got the schools and the residential in 2 weeks as well. So we're trying to keep that cycle of 2 weeks to get some momentum, which I think we're starting to build.
So it's 2 weeks today at the same time.
Correct.
Okay.
Everybody happy? You bet your life we are.
Okay. Have a good day, all of you.
Goodbye. You
Thank
too.
you very much, all.
Speak
Bye.
soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.